What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Undefined Engineering. I'm your host, Christian. I'm here with my special guest today, Dylan.
What's going on? I'm Dylan.
This is the start of a pretty cool series that we had in mind where we interview engineers in the field and go through each person's role to kind of get a feeling of what each engineer does in their day-to-day life. Because as I found when I was graduating college with a mechanical engineering degree, I didn't really know what each engineer's scope kind of was going into the career field.
No, for sure. Like before you exit college or before you graduate, it's really hard to know unless you ask people in the field or either or do some research, but you can only learn so much online.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole goal of this new series is to kind of give everybody a little bit of insight into like what it's like to actually be an engineer out in whatever field you're trying to go into. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I'm super excited. Thanks for joining, Dylan.
Yeah, no worries. Me too.
Nice. So let's get a little bit of an introduction. Like, what's your education history and your background?
Yep. So I graduated college 2020. I went to University of Miami of Ohio, and I graduated with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering as well as a bachelor's in manufacturing engineering. And then after graduation, I worked at the Air Force. I was civil service, so not enlisted or anything like that, but I did sustainment engineering there as well. So that was about a 3-year stint over there before I moved over here to Texas.
Nice. That's awesome. When you graduated college, did you kind of know what field you wanted to go into?
Not really. I mean, I had like a general want to work in the aerospace industry, honestly, back then, just because it sounded cool. But also, I've always been interested in planes and like doing stuff in space. I didn't want to end up like, I don't know, like designing toys or something like that. So I wanted to do something cool, something impactful. And then defense industry was always I always had my eyes on it, particularly because when I was growing up, I always wanted to join the military, but I never did. So I feel like this is another great way to use my talent and my skills to contribute.
Dude, yeah, I agree. I was kind of the same way when I got out of college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I thought cars were cool, and that's kind of what I went into.
Yep, that's fair. Yeah, that was probably my second bet, was like going to automotive industry, because I've always been into cars as well. So that would have been super fun.
Sweet. So like you said, you're a sustainment engineer. Can you give us like an overview of what that role is exactly and what that entails?
For sure. So, I mean, I've learned that it varies company to company, but at my last job in the Air Force, it was a pretty well-defined and I guess long-standing program. So typically when you have a product lifecycle, you'll have, research and development, launch, and then what's the vast majority of the product lifecycle is O&M, or operations and maintenance. So sustaining that product essentially. So once a company or even a government releases a product, you have to either as a customer sustain that product, or you have to as a company that develop the product, go ahead and sustain it for your customers. So maybe in the automotive industry, that would mean like constant software updates. If you worked at Tesla, for example, just maintaining the fleet, both legacy designs as well as new designs that come out. But then that could also mean like for aerospace, you could be the company that makes the plane, for example, Lockheed Martin. You could have a sustainment program for your customer where you send them maintenance updates, upgrade their fleet over time, keep that legacy going so you don't have to retire it, because of course it costs a lot of money to enter the procurement cycle within the DoD and all that. So it's really cost effective to make sure that you can sustain your product and then have it long standing. So my last position, I worked on C-5s, which is the Air Force, or honestly the DoD's largest cargo plane. So they carry like tankers with it, anything really. We used it back in the 70s to move the Hubble around, more recently for the James Webb. So there's a lot of cool projects that come into play. The C-5 specifically was like a 60-year-long airframe, and it's still going today. I mean, I assume it'll probably be sustained for about 80 years. So my job specifically, I was assigned to the flight controls. So anything that had to do with flight controls, anywhere from pilot inputs all the way out to the flight control outputs and the systems in between. Those are all my responsibility to make sure that they were mission ready, or as they would say, they'd be flight ready. So you'd be operationally ready, and to make sure that they were good to go. So that involved both updating like maintenance manuals and things of that nature, but also the more fun part of the job, in my opinion, was getting to design upgrades and look over tech data. But that also encompasses, training manuals, operators manuals, like how to actually use the aircraft, and then also decide, okay, what's worth upgrading and what's not worth upgrading. It's a really fun position, in my opinion, because you get the opportunity to not only design, but also work with all the other business functions, such as like program management, finance, legal. And I'd say within engineering, it's one of the more rare groups, not rare groups, but I'd say one of the fewer groups that get that opportunity. For example, like if you're in design or something, you're kind of working a bubble. But outside of that, if you're a quality engineer, or if you're a production engineer, manufacturing engineer, sustainment engineer, you get the opportunity to kind of bridge that gap. Within sustainment specifically, you really get the opportunity to kind of be the bridge between design engineering and production, which kind of, to go back to what I was saying earlier, how it depends on the job. In my current position here at Shield AI, we're more of a startup culture, so you automatically get the ability to do more than what your role is traditionally meant to do,
Yeah.
and what you're traditionally responsible for. But you get that opportunity to work between design engineering, manufacturing engineering, quality engineering, as well as program a lot. So it's pretty all encompassing, but it's great if you really want to get the opportunity to work at a more systems level, as well as get more breadth in your experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've always viewed like sustainment engineers in my head as like the Swiss Army knife
Yeah.
type of engineering.
No, I'd definitely say that's true. Like a lot of us, especially on the team here, are like jack of all trades. Like we can do basically whatever you need us to do.
Yeah.
We're just problem solvers. When production's going, we unblock production if there's any problems like that, or even before production starts, you make sure that the design package is ready to go, and make sure that manufacturing can handle it, and make sure everyone has what they need to get the product through the line.
Nice. So kind of like a takeaway that I heard from that is in a traditional sustainment engineering role, it's more like based on iterative design updates based on like feedback from manufacturing and customers. Is that
Yeah,
kind of
for sure. And so if you're working for like a military customer, it'll kind of come from even higher up, whoever's using the aircraft at the end of the day. So, or the product at the end of the day, you'll get kind of requests like, hey, we want this capability, or we want this capability. Like, how can we make that happen? So, for example, if you're working with like a traditional gauge cluster and an old aircraft, and you want to modernize everything and put screens everywhere and have like a modern avionics stack, we would be the engineers that essentially tackle that. And again, just like anywhere else, it's divided up to mechanical engineers, systems engineers, electrical engineers, and etc.
nice? Awesome. So I think it's a really good overview. Could you give us like a little bit of insight into what like a day-to-day type of thing would be for you in your
For sure.
position?
And it's kind of fun for me anyway, because the day to day, I guess when you step back, it's similar, but every single day is definitely very different. I know a lot of people say that about their jobs, but it's especially true in sustainment, because any day you walk in, even if you have some tasks that you need to do, for example, if you have a bunch of bugs on the design that you need to fix, that's always a backlog of things like that you can work on. But also, which is the more, I guess, exciting part of the job, is you could just have a random problem that you had no idea about, and you quickly learn to become an expert in any field, even if it's not specifically mechanical engineering. For myself as a STEM engineer, but I mean, typically, like if I'm walking through my day, I would come in, check my teams, check my emails if I wasn't already checking them before the night before, and expect something. But you'd make sure that production's okay, make sure that production has everything they need to keep going, make sure there's no engineering problems that we could solve to either unblock production or make their lives easier. And then we have a backlog of bugs that's secondary. Those bugs also have a hierarchy. So higher priority bugs mean that they're either slowing down or stopping production completely. So you take care of those according to that prioritization. And then we also have our own projects. So you get the chance to almost be like a project engineer at the same time, whether that means upgrading a certain part of the aircraft, designing a new update, doing the testing for that, the verification and all that, and then rolling that into manufacturing. Or it could be anything, even with compliance, for example, like say you find out you have a part that's not compliant to like ROHS or REACH for the European Union side of things. Then you would go through and like have to update the designs to make sure, and the definition to make sure that you aren't calling out any specialty metals or anything like that. So it really can be anything, but it basically comes down to solving problems that pertain to engineering technicalities, but also that pertain to production.
First off, that sounds awesome. Second off, that sounds like a lot of scope. And I know if I were in college, that may sound intimidating to me.
For sure.
Have there ever been moments when you were in your role where you felt like you may not have all the answers, you didn't quite know what to do in a certain
For
situation?
sure. That happens almost every single day.
Yeah.
But I would say what helped a lot in my earlier career was I got the chance to have good mentorship and folks that were already around me doing what I do now. That was super helpful because they gave a lot of insight and knowledge as to like, okay, like if you don't know something, then how do you go about solving it? And your whole time in undergrad, you're basically given that same kind of like direction. Like you get a problem, you learn how to solve it, and by the end of your 4 years, like you end up becoming a really good problem solver actually. So it's super helpful. And I'd say that's why like a lot of Fortune 500 CEOs are engineers, because you become a really efficient problem solver and you don't get lost in the weeds of things. You go, what's the problem, how do I get to a solution, let's make that happen. And especially here at Shield, and this could change at any company depending on what the expectations are like. But I found out that like for the most part, everyone around you is willing to help you because you all have the same mission and goal at the end of the day. You all want to make sure that your company succeeds or your program succeeds, and you want to make sure that you are delivering the best product possible. So as long as you can understand and learn who is the right resource to learn what from, then that really sets you up for success, because everyone doesn't know everything. I mean, again, I go in every single day and learn something new. There's things that come my way almost every single day where I'm like, I have no idea where to even start. But you break it down to, first principles, things like that.
Yeah.
And you always circle back to things you learned in school.
Nice. Awesome. That being said, I feel like I kind of know what your answer is going to be here, but would you say it's more important to have a broad knowledge base coming into the job, or like learn things while you're on the job?
I would say it's kind of a mix. I've always been one of those proponents, and it's kind of an unpopular opinion in engineering, but in engineering, like it isn't known for having the greatest of GPAs, but I've always felt like it's weird coming out of a class with like a B, for example, and it's like, okay, well, you don't know 20% of the material then.
Yeah.
And I just always thought that was weird. But as I matured as an engineer and as I've learned and joined the workforce, it's honestly swayed me closer to the other side, where I've learned like you're never going to come into a job knowing every single thing. But the main thing that you need to have in your back pocket is a willingness to learn. And honestly, a natural curiosity helps a lot too. So honestly, coming into a job and just learning new things every day, like that'll be your greatest skill as an engineer, is a willingness to learn new things, and definitely not getting stuck in old habits. Like if you learn to model one way, be open to learning and modeling new ways. If you're used to some system of configuration management, like be open to the next, because you should, I mean, having that humility to know that you don't know everything is like probably one of the greatest things you could have as an engineer. And it only builds on itself as you get older.
Dude, I definitely agree. And specifically talking about sustainment engineering, I feel like it's so objective oriented and very output facing, in terms of like you're iterating on designs that may have an active problem and that need to be solved quickly, because like you may be blocked in manufacturing, and sustainment engineering may have to come in and like iterate a design and push it out as fast as possible so you can continue a build. That being said, it takes a lot of technical skills, but I think something that a lot of people don't realize is all the soft skills, like the cross-functional communication skills and the skill set you get by like working with other teams. Is there something like, could you go into a little bit on kind of how that's influenced how you
for sure. And
things?
That was something that was honestly a surprise to me. Like, to be honest, when I graduated college and I first got that sustainment engineering job, like I never really heard of sustainment engineering before. And I was like, like I was kind of wishy-washy on it. I wasn't too excited to do it. But I always knew that I was a people person. I like talking to people and I love to learn, especially everything about how a business operates. And it ended up becoming kind of the perfect career path for me, because you do have a lot of cross-functional like projects that you're involved on. There's no decision you could really make in a vacuum. You have to ask a lot of people, get perspectives from other people, whether that be people using your product, people who train on your product, program managers even, who kind of organize the system of your product. Also design what their intent was, manufacturing what they're going through, and then technicians even, like, guys who turn wrenches. Like how are they liking the product? What could we make better about it? But almost every problem you solve, you end up talking to all of these groups, and you kind of have to develop that skill of being able to bring people together, because everyone's biggest problem is just as big as your biggest problem. And I've always kind of lived by that, like understanding that everyone's life is their own and everyone's work life is their own as well. So having that skill to be able to pull people together and help them understand why your problem is so important to you and why you need to solve it. Sometimes it'll be pretty self-evident, like, hey, we have this failure and it's causing aircraft to crash, and everyone's like, okay, I completely understand. But sometimes, like, they might not get that perspective. So being able to do that and bring the right people in the room together is super important. Kind of nuanced, but one of the things I've learned, especially more recently, was you definitely don't want too many chefs in the kitchen. So at the same time of getting that insight from other groups, you definitely want to be able to make sure you get a good idea of who can be there and who will actually be productive in the problem you're trying to solve at that moment. Now, whether you rope them in later and then you don't involve them in the first meeting, but you involve them a couple meetings later when you're getting closer to something that pertains more to their role, then you do that. But it's all these soft skills and all these kind of combination of skills that really don't have anything to do with technical knowledge that really carry you a long way in sustainment, for sure.
Nice. Yeah, no, all that cross-functional communication is awesome, and working with all those different teams.
Mm-hmm.
But it also doesn't come without like its headaches, for sure, too.
Yep.
I know something for me as a quality engineer, one of the biggest things that I had to get used to was finding ways to influence teams that weren't directly related to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as a quality engineer, a design engineer may not focus on the exact same key objectives that we are,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like, how can we influence them to do something? Do you deal with those same types of like situations as a sustainment engineer as well?
For sure. And you really have to play a balance between getting the job done, and sometimes you have to sacrifice and let maybe your higher ups or other functions know that, like, and usually it comes down honestly to bandwidth. No one, like, if you're at a company that expects high performance and everyone's a high performer around you, no one's going to not do something just because they don't want to. It's typically going to be because they don't have the time to, or to them it's not high enough of a priority to do so. So you have to be realistic with where you fall within prioritization as a company and as an organization, as to, okay, what's important right now and what needs to be done first, and then what's secondary to that. And you have to be realistic about it, because sometimes it sucks when you have a problem that's like so pressing to you, but maybe to other people they're just like, like, it's not that big of a deal. We have to be real about it sometimes, because you have to understand that, like, everyone's solving their own biggest problems again. So and you have to sacrifice sometimes, and just know that, like, okay, this timeline is going to be extended, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. But all you can do is either finish solving your part of the problem and then tabling it for later, or you can completely shift and just either solve the problem a completely different way that doesn't involve that group that can't do something that you want them to do, which is a rare instance, because usually you can't just decide what's needed and what's not. But yeah, it takes a lot of sacrifice, and it takes a lot of being real about the problem and how it fits into the bigger puzzle of the company.
Yeah, and I guess that's an important thing on, like, what you touched on earlier, the whole overall company mission and goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a lot easier when everyone's objectives as a team are kind of focused towards that mission.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and I think, like, and that again, that changes with where you're at and what kind of company you're at, because a smaller company, it'll be a lot more obvious. But if you're at like one of the big 5 companies, like, you know, Raytheon, Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop, like, if you're at one of these places, like, I mean, they have more money than a lot of governments do, so it'll be more program specific. But I think the same principles still apply. Like, what is your organization that you're part of trying to do, and then how does your personal work goals fall in line with that?
Yeah, exactly. So you've been in sustainment engineering for a few years. Is there any other career field you would consider now?
I didn't realize this when I was coming out of college, but I would have definitely liked to move more towards that program management route. I'm very organized as a person. I realized that some of my skills and some of the things I like to do, like configuration management, things like that, fall really close in line with program management. But I've also learned that I really like quality engineering as well.
Really?
Yeah. And I didn't think about that till I got to this job. But at my last job, we used to have like a whole first article lab, and they would do all kinds of tests and stuff like that in there. And I just didn't really think much of it because I'll just, make the report on what needs to be tested on a part coming in and then analyze the report when it came out. So quality to me was just like a button that you press, you're like, handle this or like get this done. But when I came to this company, and again, it shifts your experiences will change your perspectives as they should. But when I came here, I realized like how much more involved it was than that. How much more there is to do. And I kind of relate it to sustainment engineering a lot because you're kind of more on the back half of it, where it's kind of just dealing with the design that's already been done. But it's still something that's, to me, interesting and fun. Perfecting a product and being like OCD and a perfectionist myself, that's definitely something that seems interesting to me.
That's awesome. So I'm guessing you've experienced interviewing people for your team to come into your sustainment team
For
in
sure.
the past. Can you go over some things that you saw like good candidates doing versus bad candidates doing?
This was actually a really new experience for me here, getting to interview people that joins the team that I'm on. And I've learned a couple lessons. The first one that immediately comes to mind is if something seems off about a person, definitely ask them in their interview whatever is on your mind and do not give them the benefit of the doubt. I have learned that, like, especially if you work on a small team where everyone has to be a high performer and have the same kind of mindset, if you have any benefit, or if you have any doubt in your mind, like either get that answered or be very conservative with your approach to getting them onto your team and allowing them to be on the team that you work on, because you have to see this face every day and you will have to deal with the problems that they bring. Without saying names, we've had experiences of, and this is how I learned this lesson, was we ended up hiring this guy who he seemed kind of condescending and kind of cocky. And to me, I was just like, yeah, it's okay. Like maybe you're just like that. You got the interview here. You're like ready to go. And maybe he was just like nervous, and that's just how it happened to manifest itself, which is fine. I mean, in the moment, anyone can say something or be kind of off. And so I still take that with a grain of salt. Like, still understand that people are nervous while they're interviewing, for sure. But then after the fact, I was like, maybe this person will grow out of it, and it just never really ended up happening. And you just have to end up like dealing with them being like that, whether that's them not reporting back to their higher ups as they should be and giving clear communication on what their project timelines are, and understanding that like everyone's in the same boat together. But I ended up lucking out because that person is no longer on the team. They got moved to a different team, which I think was more suited for them. So it's okay. But other than that, like as someone that's coming in, like as an interviewee, I think one of the biggest things that you can do, and something that I love to see, is a very well prepared presentation. Because when it comes to like teams and culture interviews, like that's just kind of inherently the type of person you are. So the cards will fall where they do, the chips will fall where they do. But when it comes to the technical side of things, which as an engineer, that's important to me. And especially in sustainment, I really try to look at the organizational skills, their presentation skills, not even in terms of how they talk, because you can work on that, but just inherently like how they present their information and like kind of the structure of how they think. I really try to look at how they think through a problem and how they end up solving it. It's like the classic questions you ask, but it's like, you ran into this kind of problem, how would you solve it? And like that thought process, like it's really cliche, and you'll probably get it in almost every interview you go through as an engineer specifically, but it's super important to know. And being on the other side of things as an interviewer, I realized like the importance of asking that question and really understanding how the thought process is. Other than that, it's always going to be a roll of the dice. Like you won't ever know 100%. So even as an interviewee, I would take that with like, give you some confidence. Like even if you didn't think you did well, like you could have done well. They could have liked you. Even if they didn't, they might roll the dice on you and let you in. But then it's up to you to perform and to do the best you can.
Yeah, I agree. Man, speaking of interview questions like that, I've gotten in the past that this question's a little bit cruel. I don't think it's cruel. I think it makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'd like to get your opinion on this, but a question that I usually like to ask, sort of that problem-solving situational question, is, let's say I'm interviewing an electrical engineer for our team.
Yep.
or a mechanical engineer. No, but we'll go electrical engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I know they don't have experience with mechanical systems.
Yep.
And as you know, we face challenges every day where we're not familiar with what we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
So in my head, I feel like if I'm or interviewing an electrical engineer, I want to throw a mechanical engineering problem at them
Okay.
and see how they would think through it.
Yep.
So like my go-to, which I'm probably going to have to change now after this, is I'll ask about like a refrigeration system.
Okay.
For an electrical engineer. And I want to kind of see like what sort of questions they ask to centered around like the failure mode I give them to kind of make those contextual assumptions and really drive that like first principles type of thinking home.
And I would say, I don't think that's a completely unfair ask. I think that's honestly a really good way of understanding if they are like really narrowed in on one specific thing, or if they kind of think more holistically about any kind of problem. Because I could think like I'm a mechanical, but like if I had the same question, you could at least think like, okay, like there is current involved. But you can use that most basic thought to kind of guide you, because like even if you're EE or if you're ME, like you still take a couple classes outside of your main scope. Like you know, like as an ME, like I definitely had to take a couple EE classes. You dabble in programming, so you have an idea of what these things are. And I don't think it's unfair, because as the interviewer, you're not going to be expecting them to like line out a full plan or a full system or full solution for the problem, but it gives you a good idea of at least, okay, like do they have any idea of anything outside of their thing? And if they don't, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it just depends what role they're going for. Now, if you're like a super in-depth, nuanced engineer in some aspect of mechanical or electrical engineering, and you're being hired for that role, then like so be it. But if you're hiring for example, sustaining or even quality, like there's a lot of roles out there where you need some sort of you need a lot of breadth in your knowledge, or at least the ability to think outside of what you are traditionally educated on, and that's really important. And honestly, I would love to hear from them during questions like that, like, oh, like I would at least ask this person like what about this, or like get some insight, or be like, oh, I'll research about this, like do your own self-study. Like it sounds silly, but like nowadays with Chat GPT, like it's so easy to learn about a new topic. Like I use it all the time at work. When I know nothing about something, that's usually where I start.
Yeah. Always. Like if I see a Teams message and I'm like, what is that?
Yep. Exactly.
So nice having that nowadays.
I agree.
Sweet. Hannah, could we get a quick time check? We're at 28 minutes. Oh, dang. We're kind
of frying.
That's crazy. Pretty good at time. So we've gotten to I feel like we've gotten a lot of good content out of this. What would you say you enjoy most about your role?
I'd say what I enjoy most about my role, definitely the fact that I get to talk to people all the time. Like I get to talk to all these different functions, and I really get to learn more about how a business operates in depth from every function, which is something that I've always wanted to know. Something I like about sustaining is that I feel like it's kind of priming me to be a better manager in the future, and a better, like I aspire to be at a higher level by the end of my career, of course. And I think it really primes me to be able to do that, because I understand what it takes from each one of these different groups. So that's really, really fun to me. And I've also really enjoyed like being able to dabble in design. Obviously here we get the opportunity to do some design work. If design engineers are short on hand, they've pulled me and some my peers on the team to do the same thing. And it's really given us the opportunity to both grow our own skills within design, whether that's CAD work or analysis. But you also get the chance to learn from that team as well. The closer you get to work with a team that's not of your function, the better opportunity you have to learn from them and to learn more about literally just everything. So if you have that kind of mindset, like it's a perfect place to be. So I really enjoy that.
Sweet. Awesome. I guess closing question, what advice would you give to engineering students to get past that imposter syndrome that I'm sure a lot of people have moving into new roles? Let's say someone got a job as a sustainment engineer for the first time.
Yep. Let's see. I would say definitely don't feel alone in that problem. There's people that will feel that. They could be well into their 50s and they might still have that feeling. So that's a feeling that will never escape you when you're trying something new. But you just have to have confidence in yourself. Like, hey, I made it this far, and there were all these other peoples that could be here instead of me. And then how I personally have dealt with it is you just have to put in the hours, especially when you first start and you don't know the expectations where everyone's around you. I'm not saying you have to work less hard after a while, but when you first get there, like don't let people deter you from sprinting as hard as you can in the beginning. Cause I mean, sure, you'll burn out, but like, I mean, you either swim or drown. So, so you really don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So with the imposter syndrome is like, take the opportunity to learn as much as you can from the people around you. Try to prepare the best you can, do research. If they're a company that makes actuators, do all the research you can on actuators and learn everything there is about an actuator there is to know. If you're working for like a defense tech company and they develop, I don't know, a small aircraft or a drone or something like that, learn as much as you can about the space. It doesn't even have to be that specific drone, but learn the different groups of UAVs or UASs or whatever it is. Just gain knowledge in that beforehand. And even while you start, just keep learning as much as you can. And then ask questions. Find people that are higher up in the company that have time and schedule one-on-ones with them. Learn from them as to what they would do. Ask them questions about what they think you should do, and just gain as much perspective as you can from other people. Ask questions and learn as much as you can, because that's really all you can do at the end of the day.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thanks, Dylan. I really appreciate you hopping on the podcast. I feel like you had a lot of really insightful information about sustainment engineering, so I really appreciate it. Yeah,
for sure.
Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll catch y'all next week on Undefined Engineering.
Cool.
Sweet.